You're listening to In the Chair, a podcast for Freemasons in England, the UK and around the world. Find out more at masonicpodcast.com. But first, welcome your host, Robert Bone.
Hello there, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and I hope you're having a great day wherever and wherever you're listening to this. And this is, of course, In the Chair, the Masonic podcast for Freemasons and anyone interested in Freemasonry, whether you're in England, the UK or around the world. And I'm your host today, and I'm Robert Bone. Many thanks for hitting the subscribe button and the download button. I hope you enjoy it. We're on to show number 5. We're starting to find our feet here a bit. So I hope you do enjoy the podcast. If you've got any comments on it, please get in contact. It's at robert@masonicpodcast.com, and I appreciate your feedback. I know some people have been going onto iTunes and leaving feedback there and comments on the website. Regarding iTunes, just go on to, easiest way to find it is masonicpodcast.com/iTunes, and if whilst you're there you hit the subscribe button, or if you can let us know by leaving a review, rating a show, that helps us to just get found by other Freemasons as well who are users of iTunes. So on to today's show. You probably notice each time I start the show, I always like to say this is a podcast for Freemasons in England, the UK and around the world. And that is because I'm a Freemason. I'm in England, which is part of the UK. And of course it's on iTunes, so it's listenable to anyone around the world. Which indeed it is. Now it's very easy for me this is done independently. Although I am a member of Kennet Lodge, Kennet Lodge meets within the province of Berkshire, and the province of Berkshire is part of the United Grand Lodge of England. It's very easy for me just to focus on those. But I do get comments, and some of them do come through, especially a chap called Cams Campbell. He had contacted me through the website and actually said he's a Scottish Mason. What's the differences between Scottish and English Masonry? And I actually thought, well, I'm an English Mason, so what's the differences between English and Scottish Masonry? So it seems to make sense. So I've managed to arrange an interview with Barry Lowe. Now, Barry Lowe is a past master of Lodge Dunoon, Argyll, number 335, which is part of the Grand Lodge of Scotland. So, of course, I'm an independent English Mason. He's an independent, so to speak, Scottish Mason. So we had a bit of a conversation to discuss and try to see what the difference is and, more importantly, what the similarities are between the two different types of Freemasonry. Just so you know, if you want to find out more about this, some of the links we talk about, you can find that quite easily just by going onto the show notes. And the show notes are at masonicpodcast.com/5. So that's masonicpodcast.com/5. So that's masonicpodcast.com/5. Go onto there. Any links to the Twitter accounts we mention, and also the Lodge websites, as well as the websites for the Grand Lodge of Scotland and United Grand Lodge of England. I will catch up with you again after the interview. Got a bit more because of course I've got my when you're listening to this, my installation will be less than a week away, so that's getting quite exciting until we actually go into the chair myself, hence the name of the podcast. But before we talk about that, I really do hope you enjoy this. Barry's enthusiasm for Freemasonry is really apparent, so please welcome to the show Barry Lowe from Lodge Dunoon, Argyll. I've got someone a little bit north of the border with me today, and that's Barry Lowe. Barry Lowe is in Scotland. He's a member of a lodge which is part of the Grand Lodge of Scotland. He's just popped online to give his views so we can have a bit of discussion to find out what the difference is between Scottish and English lodges. So, Barry, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself to the listeners?
Absolutely. Hi there, Robert. It's great to be on the show. My name's Barry Lowe. I am a past master of Lodge Dunoon Argyll 335, which is a lodge in the province of Argyll and the Isles. As you say, we come under the Grand Lodge of Scotland. I'm a past master of the lodge, and I am currently the lodge tailor. Oh,
great. So at the moment you're sat outside?
Yes, which makes the 140-mile round trip that I have to make home to my lodge all the more worthwhile.
Ouch. So that's a bit of a trek, isn't it? Actually, whereabouts in Scotland roughly are you?
The lodge is in Dunoon. Now, Dunoon is on the west coast. It's on a a piece of land called the Cowell Peninsula.
Right.
So we're on the banks of the Clyde, kind of further down from Glasgow and Greenock, which are the main kind of ports on the Clyde. We're further down. It's an old seaside resort. I actually live, however, nowadays on the other side of the country in a town called Grangemouth.
Okay.
But I still travel home to attend my mother lodge.
And that's your mother lodge, so you go back and forth there. And is that pretty much once a month you're going back there?
Yes, I had the lodge, when I was going up through the offices and into the chair, the lodge met twice a month, but we revamped our way of working a couple of years ago, and we now meet on the fourth Tuesday of the month. Okay,
that's great. And as was said, I mean, you are your lodge is part of the Grand Lodge of Scotland.
Yes, indeed.
Which is one of the things where I'm my lodge, Kennet Lodge, my mother lodge, meets in Berkshire, which is pretty much at the south of England. So we're polar opposites in that respect. And of course, my lodge is sort of under the jurisdiction of the United Grand Lodge of England. I actually really don't know what happens much north of the border, and I don't think you really know what happens much south of the border. So I thought it would be interesting, and also not only for us to find out a bit about what happens north and south divide, but I know quite a few of the listeners in the chair actually are completely out the country as well, so they probably actually don't know what any of us do over here in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you think is, from your point of view, what would you say is the differences between Scottish and English Freemasonry?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the differences between the two are rich and varied, to be quite honest, but the one thing that always has to be borne in mind is it is the same. It is just Freemasonry, you know, and an English brother coming into my lodge, of which we do have one regular visitor actually who comes up from England.
Right.
You would be totally familiar when you walk out of the lodge. You would know what you were looking at, you would know where to go, and you would know what to do. And I imagine the same would be much the same, you know, if I was visiting down in England. I've never actually visited in England myself, I've got to say.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that most Freemasons would notice coming up from England, it would be the regalia. There are some rather striking differences with the regalia. First off, our aprons are slightly different in that we have a semicircular flap on our aprons.
Okay, because we have the triangular one in England.
Yeah,
yes.
We have a semicircular one, which I think leans more towards the old operative style of Mason's aprons.
Okay.
But more startling than that is the colour. I know in England, the sort of daughter lodges, it's sky blue,
yes.
And then when you go up to provincial and grand rank, it becomes a darker sort of blue. Is that correct?
Starts with a light blue, and then once people get provincial honours, and then go into Grand Lodge, those sort of things. Yeah, it's the darker shade of blue. So, what colours? What colours are Scottish aprons?
Well, in Scotland, each lodge picks the colour of its regalia.
Really?
Which is an important part in the setting up of any new lodge. It's deemed as a big decision up here.
Yes.
For instance, my lodge, we actually wear tartan regalia.
Right. I was going to ask, but didn't know if that was just too cliched.
No.
Right. I'm sure all the listeners were all tempted to say, "Is it tartan?" But I didn't actually want to.
It is in our case, we wear the Campbell of Codder tartan,
right,
which is the tartan of the Duke of Argyll.
Okay.
Who's the local landed gentry, if you like. But we are the only ones that wear that tartan. Our neighbouring lodges, we have a lodge in Sandbank, and they wear a dark blue, very similar to an English provincial kind of blue. On the other side, the lodge in Ellen and Tower wear a kind of maroon, which is similar to the Grand Steward's lodges down in England.
Okay, yeah, which is more scarlet colour, yes.
Yeah, but as I say, every lodge is different, and sometimes the colour can actually reflect the nature of the lodge. There's a lodge in Glasgow called Anima, which was set up by Masons in the cinema industry in the early part of the 20th century, and their regalia is black and silver.
Right.
Sort of black and white.
Black screen, silver screen, yes.
And one of the most remote lodges in my province is a lodge called Chiran Yorna, which is out in the Isle of Tiree.
Right.
And their regalia is a beautiful kind of orangey yellow colour, and it's the colour of the barley they use to brew the whiskey on the islands.
Okay.
So, so as I say, Scottish Masonic means they're very colourful affairs. You know, everybody wears different colours.
I was thinking that because often, when you go visiting in an English lodge, everyone all turns up and there's the two tones. You've either got the light blue or the dark blue.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking if you go Scottish, and I think what's great with that is there's a real tradition. You know, you're part of your mother lodge, and each lodge has got its own character, and it seems like people haven't just gone, I like the shade of this. There's actually a logic behind, like the black and silver for the ones based on the cinema. That's just thought's gone into it.
Yeah, as I say, it is a very big part of the process of establishing a new lodge. There is a lot of thought goes into it, and as you say, we're rightly very, very proud of the regalia that we have.
Yes.
The provincial and the Grand Lodge, they wear green regalia, thistle green.
Right.
So their regalia is very uniform. All the provinces, provincial Grand Lodges wear the same regalia, and Grand Lodge is very similar as well.
Okay, well that's pretty interesting. I've also heard that in English lodges, a lot of work falls down to the master. Some of that can get outsourced, but I've actually heard that in Scottish, more Scottish rite, that the officers actually do quite a lot of the work. It's, of course, the masters are obviously running the show, so to speak, but sometimes the wardens and the deacons are doing maybe a little bit more than they would do in English Freemasonry. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. Again, it depends on the lodge itself. Ritual is another thing that can vary quite a lot in Scotland. We have standard rituals. In England you have the emulation and the tailor working and the various things. We have, there's the Harvey ritual, the Gowdy lock ritual, and there's a kind of obscure one called the McBride ritual, which isn't used very much. Right. But every lodge will pick the one that they're going to use, and then they kind of customise it to their own working, if you like. Obviously it has to follow the path of the degrees and so on. In my lodge, we call it colloquially the McFarlane ritual, after the man who kind of finalised our ritual and wrote it down. In our lodge, the degrees are run by what is called the conferring master, which is a temporary position that is given to a member of the lodge for that meeting, and they take charge of the degree work itself. 9 times out of 10, the master will deliver the obligation. But will tend not to do much more than that in the degree work. Obviously, for the opening and the closing of the lodge and the business, it's the master's the man in charge. But yeah, so it can be split up between really any of the officers and the various parts of the degree, the tools and the different parts. They're kind of divvied up, if you like, between... So I'm quite happy to do a bit on the floor. I'll do the tools this month, and so on. So it's far less formalised than the English ritual. Sure,
I think English ritual might be catching up on that respect, because although a lodge of emulation, it is meant to be pretty much the master gets up and does it, and everyone sits there and pretty much does most of it. What, to be honest, now starts actually happening in most lodges is for the master to go up to the obligation. But sometimes after that to then start shipping a few things out, because I'm actually going to be going into the chair from as we're speaking today, it's going to be 9 days. So I literally am on the single digit countdown until my installation. So obviously I'm now thinking about that, but also thinking about the ceremonies I'm going to be doing, obviously, coming up. And one thing that I have been told is, obviously pre-plan it up front, but the master, as long as it can go up to and including the obligation, after those, for example, the working tools, some of the charges, it can be outsourced to a past master to do if needs be. And also it's a great way for something like the working tools for younger masons who are coming up to just get a little bit of chance of going out on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, the lodge that actually conferred my third degree, they come from a town in Lanarkshire called Cleland, and from what I can remember of my third degree, the master actually did the vast majority of that ceremony.
Okay. And that's I know an emulation ritual, that's a big ceremony.
Yeah, it was. And as I say, I've never really seen that done again all the years I've been in Masonry, It was just that lodge, it was the way that they operate kind of thing. I've got to say, I would have been slightly concerned if my lodge operated that way when I went to the chair.
Yes. I mean, I'm one of those things where what I want to do is to go through and try and do it as much as possible, but it's always nice to know, and I think it takes the pressure off a little bit if you know that if needs be things can be a little bit outsourced, just to know. But I think that's something that maybe is more prevalent in Scotland, but I think some English lodges are starting to follow that trend a little. But I personally think it's for the good.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always liked it because it meant you were involved in the floor work from quite an early age, if you like, in Masonic terms. I mean, I remember being on the floor within the first 6 months of me completing my third degree.
Great.
And you can do that to try and encourage new members to get them involved. Because sometimes if you're just sitting watching every month, you feel a little bit left out. I get very itchy feet if I'm not doing something during the degree. I can't sit and watch anymore. I have to be involved somewhere.
I am exactly like you. I know that sometimes Freemasons, there's I think two reasons why some leave. Partly, one reason might be because they're afraid of getting involved. And they're like, oh no, they're sitting there watching the master doing all this work and everyone else doing all these things and thinking, crikey, how am I going to learn that? The other flip side is when they don't get involved enough. And then what happens is they're travelling, especially if you've got a long journey, you're maybe having to take the afternoon off of work, travelling to a lodge meeting to basically sit on the sidelines and watch everyone else. And after a while, I think that's going to be a little bit, could be a bit boring. And if you're just literally turning up to watch people do something. And I do think doing those little bits, like one of my first things was to do the working tools. I think it was a first degree working tools a while later. And it's just one of those things which just gets you out, gets you doing a couple of bits and pieces. Everyone knows it's one of your first times. They all just see all your, go through your other ceremonies a couple of months before. And it gives you that confidence to go out there, muck it up, but get told to know it's okay. Get a few prompts and slowly start on it. And before you know it, you're going through the deacon's chairs, you're going through the warden's chairs. And suddenly it starts coming up, doesn't it?
Yeah,
and you find
absolutely.
yourself in the chair, and as I am, coming very, very quickly towards the chair. I mean, it was a long time ago, and it felt like 9 years ago since I was actually going to be going in the chair, and now I'm down to 9 days. And the last seven or so years have gone by very quick.
Yeah, I can imagine. I remember it well.
You do, right? I've been told I've got a lot to look forward to. So
I absolutely loved it. I possibly think I was maybe a little too young when I did it. I was 27 when I went through the chair. And I think if I had my time again, I would have maybe taken a few years longer and maybe matured slightly. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I've never lost the love for it. I still go back to my lodge. Even now, I'm for 20 years a member now. So. Oh,
brilliant. So is there a chance maybe that you might go through the chair again at another point, or have you got a good, healthy number of people coming up through the ranks?
The lodge certainly is taking over. We've always got new candidates coming in.
Brilliant.
Maybe not as many as we would like, but I think that really has to be said for every lodge. Certainly in Scotland anyway. I'm not sure what it's like down south, but we do struggle a bit for candidates. But we seem to have a fairly steady flow of them coming through. And we're lucky at the moment in my lodge in that we have guys, in the deacons and in the warden's positions who are keen to move on up the chain. So I'm happy just to sit and fill in the various offices that need filling in. I don't know if I would go back to the chair again. Certainly maybe not back home in Dunoon. While I'm happy to go back once a month for my meetings, I think if I was going back for committee meetings and inquiries and this...
Your rehearsals and all the administration that I guess goes with being the master of the lodge.
Exactly. I mean, my lodge, we own our own premises. Right. And we have a social club with a bar, a licensed bar in it and stuff like that. So there was that was the thing that kind of shocked me. I never had any problem with ritual. I could learn ritual and deliver it. Right. I seemed to take to that quite well, but suddenly at the age of 27, I found myself responsible for this building with shop premises in it and a bar and stuff, and I had no idea. I had a lot of help from past masters, but I had no idea what I was doing.
Well, I know they often say that, Masonry makes, men sort of, almost grow up, so to speak, but and take on new skill sets. But I think that's a whole new skill set that is completely new to me. To not only are you having to run the lodge, you're having to pretty much run a business premises by the sound of it, and a licensed bar. But I'm guessing it's you've kind of got you've probably picked up some skills from that has been useful in later life.
Delegation,
that's it, yes.
I think that was the key skill I learned.
Try to get someone else to do it. which is brilliant. Actually, regarding the ritual, you said you picked it up quite easy. What was your preferred method for learning? Because just the other a few episodes back, in episode 3, had Rick Smith, who's actually written a book, Learning Masonic Ritual.
Yeah,
and he goes through he goes through different methods. But one of the things I found, and what I think we found, is that different people learn differently. So what was your way that you found?
I found it was always quite useful to type out the piece of ritual that I was learning. So quite often I would, create like a little Word document on my computer and so on and type out. And I found that the action of reading it and typing it in would kind of embed it into my head. And then it was just a matter of rehearsing it and getting it all there kind of thing. A number of years ago there I was asked to be an installing master for a chap that was going into the chair, and that was a whole new ceremony that while I'd seen it, I had never actually delivered any of it myself. And what I did with that one was I typed up lots of little wallet-sized cards. I kind of broke the ceremony down. And I carried these and I wandered the grounds of the hospital that I work in like a madman at lunchtime, just muttering away to myself, reading these cards out of my wallet kind of thing, But I was always fairly lucky. It always seemed to go in quite easily for me. It was just one of those things that I never really struggled too badly picking up ritual kind of thing.
I find for myself personally, brute force. In a way, you actually have to, and this is the thing, I think when people join Masonry, if they joined pretty much at the age of 20-ish, they pretty much come straight from college, straight from university, their mind is more used to reading and retaining information. Whereas I think after you've been out of study for a couple of years, when you're then thrust into giving this blue book and you've got to learn, it can be a bit daunting. And I found I had to force myself to do it, and then once I'd got some of it, my brain went, oh yeah, I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to learn this and remember this. And almost like, back like it used to be when you're having to revise for your exams. I did get a message from someone the other day, and I can't remember off the top of my head who it was, but so apologies for that, whoever the listener is who messaged. But they've been saying they'd been trying to learn by recording it onto CD and listening to it in the car. And I know some people have said they swear by it. They've said that's a great method because you pick it up. For me, I just could not get to grips with that. And I would listen to pieces, I'd recorded bits, put it on, saved it actually onto my iPod, listening to it back. And for me, every time I listened to it, it was like I was listening to it for the first time.
Yeah, I think with me, if I wouldn't fancy that either, I've got to say, and I think I would have to keep rewinding. I like it in my hand, and if there's a line that I'm just not quite getting, just glance down, there's the line.
That's it, yes.
And carry on, whereas you can't really do that, if you're listening to something. So I don't know how well that would work for me.
I think it's useful for familiarity, maybe, just to get used to hearing it. Almost like if you watch a film or listen to a song, you just subconsciously absorb, and then when you actually come around to learning it, it's not a surprise to you. But I think, but some people swear by it. They say it's great. And maybe perhaps for sometimes the questions when you are a new Mason and you're going through your passing and raising ceremonies, those questions at the beginning, then because that's a bit of back and forth, you're then getting used to hearing a question, you giving your answer, hearing the question. So that's a bit of a method. But it's always interesting because everyone seems to have their own way of learning it. Some people can do it in big chunks. Some people just cram it in parrot fashion.
Yeah, I think it's very much each to their own, really, what just works for you, isn't it?
Yes. Is there much in because actually from what we're actually saying here, but as far as the actual workings of Freemasonry go, pretty much it sounds like, apart from what it actually looks like inside the lodge with everyone's aprons, the workings actually sound very similar to English and Scottish are quite alike. Is there any bits that you know of that might be unique and maybe in any wordings or phrasings?
Certainly the third degree, the Master Mason ceremony in Scotland is it's a lot more dramatic,
right?
to use that term. There's a section of it called the perambulation, and it's a reenactment of the story, if you like.
Yes.
And it's a little more hands-on, I think, than it is in England sometimes.
So if there's any English Masons who are looking to possibly travel to Scotland, it might be, if they're looking to see one, try and aim for a raising ceremony. That would be a good one to...
Yes, I actually met it's a cousin of my cousin
Right.
On his mother's side of the family. I met him just a few weeks ago there, and I knew this chap when I was young. But we knew each other when we were kids. I hadn't seen him in years, and we met at a kind of a Highland gathering in my town just a few weeks ago there, and we were chatting, and it turned out he was a secretary of a lodge in Lancashire.
Okay.
And we were chatting away, and one of the first things he said to me was, I've always wanted to come up and see a Scottish third degree kind of thing. So, certainly I've heard a few English Masons say they would like to see it. Obviously, it's the same story, it's the same allegory and everything that's in it. In terms of any phrases or anything like that, I'm not sure. We still use the ancient penalties.
Right.
In our obligations, but we qualify it by saying that these are no longer required of you. This is just an allegory type thing. But we do still explain that to them in rather gory terms sometimes.
There are some rights. I think it's York Rite, which is pretty much almost back as it was a couple of 100 years ago. Obviously, it's and I think people that have to learn that to pretty much feel like they're learning a whole new language, just not a whole new sort of ritual to it. Again, all comes from the same place, all the same stories. Just the way it's presented is it's got its own way, and I'd like to see it because I've been told when you see it, you know what you're kind of expecting, but it's still different.
Yeah, there's a lodge in Glasgow, Lodge the Gale, which historically was made up of men who'd come off the islands and come to Glasgow to work.
Right.
And it was a sort of gathering point for them to join this lodge. And for a long, long time, and it was only in the last 10 or 20 years, I think they stopped it, but they used to have to take their obligations in Gaelic.
Okay, right.
And I don't know what people down south think, but very few of us up here actually know Gaelic.
Well, that's what I'm thinking of. It's one of those things where it is a dying language, isn't it? I'm guessing if you're part of that, you just have to learn it and just know, hopefully, that you're saying the right thing.
Yeah, just to spout it back out parrot fashion.
Because actually,
I think the other terms I think that maybe English Masons wouldn't be familiar with is possibly some of the lodge office bearers. We have a lot more office bearers than they do in England.
Okay.
For instance, we have a substitute master and a depute master.
Right.
These are, in most lodges, they are a kind of honorary position, so you're not elected into them. The master picks who takes those two offices. And it's quite often used, maybe if their father was a member or something like that, they'll give him the office of depute master and substitute master.
Right.
Some lodges, they're what are called progressive offices, but not many. But we also have things like there's the lodge piper.
Okay.
Which obviously is the man that plays the bagpipes at the meetings. We're lucky we have a number of pipers in our lodge. So.
Is it standard then for Scottish meetings to actually have a piper? Because I mean, in England, we have an organist. That's the traditional. Most of the times you'll have a lodge organist, or at least most provinces might have a pool of organists. So they go around and play the organ and get a free dinner.
We have the position. I don't think it's organist. It's director of music, I think, is the official title given to that office. But yeah, we do have it, and we have an organ in our lodge, but nobody's played it for years, to be honest.
Right.
But yeah, lodge piper is an official office in Scottish Freemasonry. Some lodges don't have one because they just don't have anybody that can play the pipes. As I say, we're lucky. We have a very, very experienced piper as a past master of our lodge, and he's done it for years. Right. And there's the jewel is a set of bagpipes resting on a square. Right.
Okay.
So we have offices like that. There's an office of lodge jeweller who's responsible for the regalia.
Okay.
And lodge architect who's responsible for any premises that the lodge may have. So there's a lot of these offices that I know they don't have down south. So things like that might be a bit unfamiliar to English Mason coming up.
But pretty much the nuts and bolts of it, I guess what's under the hood, so to speak, is Masonry.
Absolutely.
And that's I guess that's the thing is you have these, I mean, here we're in the UK. I mean, how I am in Berkshire, you got just to the east. I've got the Metropolitan in London. We've got Hampshire. I'm surrounded by on the south, Oxfordshire to the north, and all of these are pretty much the same, all a little bit different. When you cross the border almost into one of those local provinces, it's a little bit different. But then going further afield into Scotland, obviously as we've discussed, things get a bit more different. But I think, and if you go internationally, there's still going to be things different, but fundamentally it's the same, isn't it? And that's why we say, we're all brethren wherever we are.
Probably the one thing that we've not mentioned, which is probably one of the biggest differences, is we actually have a fourth degree,
right?
The Mark degree.
That was I was going to ask you about that actually, because for us that's separate. But people can take the Mark degree and go into chapter. But is that actually part of your natural progression?
Yeah, it has a very funny position in Scotland, the Mark degree, in that the Mark degree itself is actually governed by the Supreme Grand Royal Arch chapter, so it's part of Royal Arch Masonry in Scotland. But for hundreds of years, the craft lodges practiced it, and they kind of refused to stop practicing it.
Right.
So I think it was in the kind of 1920s there was an accord reached between the Grand Lodge of Scotland and the Supreme Grand Royal Arch chapter of Scotland. So the degree remains a Royal Arch degree, but the Grand Lodge of Scotland and its daughter lodges can confer it. So it's probably in the region of about 90% of Scottish Freemasons receive the Mark degree, because you get it after your Master Mason degree.
Okay, which is probably almost the polar opposite to what it is south of the border in England. I'd probably say, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'd probably say between maybe 10-20% probably have the Mark degree. I'd probably say about 50% probably, and these are me just doing literally the straw poll sort of poll, thinking, right, who's in my lodge, and probably about half actually go into chapter. So,
in Scotland, you have to have the Mark degree before you can go into the Royal Arch chapter.
Oh, okay.
And if you don't, then you receive it in the Royal Arch chapter. I actually got my Mark degree in my Royal Arch chapter, but that doesn't happen very much nowadays, to be honest. But in Scotland, you must have your Mark, and if you don't, then you get that in the Royal Arch as part of that progression. Whereas I know in England, it's a completely autonomous order.
Because that's something I actually want to do is to find someone over the coming weeks to actually to come on in the chair and actually explain a little bit more about some of the side orders and and chapter and Mark. Because I know when I joined Freemasonry, I went on a little evening and someone explained about all these different side orders and bits, and I was completely confused. So then there was all these tree diagrams they'd put up of all these different side orders. And so I bought a book on it, and that made me even more confused. And now you're saying it's actually there's more happening and in Scotland it can be different as well. Yeah, I'm thinking I think it cannot just be me who just gets completely flummoxed by why is something relevant for this and not for that, and why is it not all of the same, and why is it necessary for some people here and not there. I think that's going to be quite an interesting conversation to have with someone. So I was going to say, if there's any listeners who can actually explain that to me, then please get in contact and I'll get you on the show as well, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't want to appear stupid by asking, but they're just blindly nodding along and going, yeah, of course I understand that. And it can be quite confusing, can't it, all these things? Oh,
absolutely, yeah. And especially, as you say, when you start to look about it, and with the prevalence of the internet now, you can kind of find out about orders in other countries like America and Grand Lodge of England, Grand Lodge of Ireland, and they're all just different, and I think it can lead to a level of confusion. I joined a lot of them when I first joined Freemasonry, and to be honest, it's really only my craft lodge that I attend.
Sure.
With any regularity nowadays, kind of thing. I kind of went through a period of just joining everything.
Sure.
Folk would put forums in front of me and I would just sign them and join, kind of thing.
I think that's what I done as well.
It's the right way of doing it,
Yeah, I mean, I actually, what it was in chapter, and at the moment, because I know I'm coming up to going into the chair, I've actually just taken a bit of a sabbatical from that one, just to go, look, let me just concentrate on craft, get through the chair, and then I can start going through the different offices and chapter, why a Masonic career can be a long career. We don't have to try to fit it all into a 7-year period.
Exactly.
So it's enjoy, and just basically then sit back and enjoy it. You don't want to get it all over and done. Okay, so I think we've covered actually quite a bit, and I think one of the things to take away from that bit of discussion is that things are different, but there's a heck of a lot that's the same.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I think if really what should happen is anyone in Scotland should try to come south and see a lodge in England, and vice versa. And I think also internationally, if to go and visit a lodge. A friend of mine in my lodge used to live in France for a bit and went to a French lodge, and he said that basically it was exactly the same as emulation ritual, just in French. But apart from that, everything else was exactly the same. But the direct translations were exactly the same. It had just literally been almost put into Google Translate, hit the English to French button, and they'll just do what come out the other end. Actually, before you go, if it's okay, Barry, got a few little quick questions, and I'll try to ask the same questions to each of the guests, just to try and find out a little bit more about you as well, if that's okay.
Okay, no problem.
So, first one is a bit of an obvious one, but just to ask, so why did you join Freemasonry?
With me, it was the family thing. My family go back about 4 generations in my lodge.
Okay.
And basically, my mother's brother, my uncle,
right,
when I was 23, basically, he approached me with the words, "Isn't it about time you joined the lodge?" And I was given a form.
Right.
In fairness, I had friends who had joined a neighbouring lodge at that time, and I had become interested in it.
Right.
And I just dived straight in the minute I got the opportunity, kind of thing. But with me, it was family.
It was family, yeah, because some people find it in all different ways. That found, I mean, considering it's that sort of 4th generation for you, and I guess that really harks back to right at the beginning when we were saying about lodges have different tartans and those. I guess there's a real family, Are you the only one who's sort of got a generational thing, or is it in your lodge a few more?
No, it's quite common. If anybody goes on to our website, which is cowlmasoniclodges.co.uk, and we have three lodges within that website. If you click on the Dunoon Argyll one, there's a page in there called A Family Legacy, which I wrote.
Okay.
But it wasn't my family, it's a family called the McFarlanes, and they go back, I think, 5 generations now.
Crikey.
And we actually have a picture of... He was a past master of our lodge, Andrew McFarlane, and his 6 sons, and he's got his master's regalia on, and they've all got their master masons aprons on, So yeah, it is quite a common thing in Scotland. It's quite often the father will bring the son in, and we of course have this concept of the Lewis, so that if your father is a mason, you can join at 18. Right. If not, you have to wait till 21.
Okay, that's quite interesting. Talking about the website and everything, I'll be doing the show notes for the show, which will also have links on. So any listeners can just go on to masonicpodcast.com, go onto the show notes and click through there. So I'll just mention that to anyone who's driving along. Don't have to try to type that into your iPhone whilst you're at traffic lights. Okay, so... one of the questions, which I think is quite important, isn't just about why you joined, but I think retention is very important nowadays. So why did you stay? Because you don't always know what you're getting into. So once you had actually joined, how come you kept your membership up?
I think a number of reasons. I enjoy the drama and the mystery of the whole thing, and always have. But for me, I think it really comes down to the brotherhood. I feel a genuine affinity to the men in my lodge. They're all very good friends, even the ones that I don't see out with the lodge. I look forward to getting back and seeing them, and that kind of sense of brotherhood that the lodge brought to me was very important. And sometimes it's just nice to go out and be amongst your own kind for a wee while, and just enjoy being out like that, and then you come home and you get back into your private life again.
I think sometimes you have your friends that you know anyway, but I think Masonry forces you to be friends with people that you normally wouldn't be friends with, but then that variety is the spice of life, and you actually sort of meeting people that you normally wouldn't actually integrate with normally, and there you are, it's all sitting next to each other and having a great time. Do you have a memorable experience which in Freemason, not necessarily wouldn't have to be in a ceremony, just maybe something that you might not have experienced if you weren't a Mason?
Yeah, I think the one that leaps to mind, the town where the lodge is, the town that I grew up in, for many years had an American naval base in it.
Right.
It was the site of the American ballistic missile fleet during the Cold War.
Okay.
So we used to get a lot of American visitors to our lodge, and we also had a lot of American men that joined in Dunoon and then left again. Now, just when I had gone into the chair in 2000, my mum got in touch with me about a letter that had been written into the local paper by a man in America saying that he'd served in the Navy in Dunoon and so on. And my mum recognised the name, and she said, "I think your grandfather knew him." So anyway, there had been an email address, and I contacted the man via email, and I said, "You don't know me." I said, "I'm the the Master of Lodge Dunoon Argyll. I believe that you were a member of the lodge kind of thing, and we got talking, and it turned out that my grandfather had actually been his seconder
Right.
when he joined.
Wow.
But he carried on his masonry when he went back to America in Virginia.
Right.
And he rose to the kind of equivalent over there of a provincial Grand Master. And he was actually coming home to Scotland for a visit that year, and he came to my lodge. And it was the first time he'd been back in about 20 years, and the grandson of his seconder was in the chair. And we didn't...
all these weird coincidences just come together. Wow, that's amazing stories.
I loved that. That blew my mind.
Those sort of things do crop up quite often, these weird coincidences that Freemasonry just seems to happen. Would you have any advice to anyone who's maybe either anyone who's thinking of joining, or perhaps a young Master Mason who's currently going through? Any advice, any tips for them?
I think to anybody considering joining, I would just say go for it. I mean, I'm nearly 20 years now. I was relatively young when I joined, and I've just loved every minute of it. There's even the bad times I've had, I wouldn't change. I've just loved everything about my masonry. To somebody that's newly joined, I think it's what you and I said a wee while ago. Don't rush. Take your time. Just enjoy it. Don't bite off more than you can chew. If you don't feel comfortable, if you feel that you're having too much, take a step back, but don't let it push you out. Just take your time. It's like you say, we've got a long, long Masonic career ahead of us all, so take your time and enjoy it.
I think that is absolutely cracking advice. I know 5 years ago, I was chomping at the bit. I was starting to go through the offices. Those last 5, 6, 7 years have absolutely flown round quickly, and part of me is thinking, perhaps, I've gone through at pretty much the standard pace of do every office, but I'm thinking, if I wouldn't want to have done this quicker. You want to savour it a bit, otherwise it goes over too quick. So I think that's fantastic advice. Barry, just to sort of let everyone know before we go, how they can sort of find out about you. On Twitter, it's Dunoon Argyll 355, isn't it? That's the
335.
335. And do you want to just confirm how that's spelt?
It's at Dunoon, which is Dunoon.
Yep.
Argyll, which is Argyll 335. That's the Twitter account.
That's the Twitter account that you're running on behalf of your lodge. Barry, I've got to say many, many thanks for taking the time out. I'm hoping it's answered a few questions about some people have about Freemasonry on both sides of the border, I think. Some of you in Scotland looking down go, what are you chaps doing in England, and vice versa. It's I really appreciate it. During my time in the chair, I want to do some visiting. Scotland is a long way to go, but from what you're saying, I'm very, very tempted. I'm sure I might have some air miles points somewhere on a credit card or something. And I'd really love to, obviously try to get up, and whether it's going to be during my time in the chair or some point in the future, it's now on my bucket list is to definitely get up, and hopefully it might be your lodge. But it would be great to actually visit a Scottish lodge. So
that would be great. I mean, thanks very much for having me on, Robert. I've had an absolute blast talking to you, but I want you to promise me if you ever do make it up to Scotland that you come and visit us in Dunoon Argyll, because we'd love to have you.
It'd be absolutely fantastic, and I appreciate it. And on behalf of myself and all the listeners to In the Chair, Barry Lowe, many thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Many thanks once again to Barry Lowe from Lodge Dunoon Argyll, number 335 in the Grand Lodge of Scotland. Many thanks for the time and for bringing so much enthusiasm to Freemasonry. I think that rubbed off, and I'm sure all you listeners to In the Chair will appreciate the enthusiasm that both Barry and I have for Freemasonry, and I'm sure that enthusiasm is infectious, and hoping you've picked up on it. And hopefully we've left you wanting to hear more. That's the plan. And of course, also thank you to Cams Campbell. He's the person that had actually sent the email. He's the guy that is in Scotland wondering what the difference is between the Scottish and English Freemasonry. That really started the ball rolling and led to me speaking to Barry. So many thanks for that. And if any other listeners have got any questions in particular, anything, maybe just minor things that I might be able to find out for you, or any suggestions for interviews, or if you're a person yourself who would like to talk about things. During the interview, I was talking to Barry and I said about the side orders, and I've actually had more people since coincidentally contact me asking for more explanations about side orders. So that's something that I want to sort out. If you are someone who listens to this and go, well, actually, I'm a member of Mark, I'm a member of a chapter, you know the things about the Knights Templar and all those, and know a little bit about the history and can put it together about how they all join, how they all come together under the generic term of Freemasonry, please contact me. Drop me an email, robert@masonicpodcast.com, and hopefully we can work out to have you on the show. Or if anyone else has got any other ideas or suggestions, please do get in contact. It really is appreciated. When I started this a few weeks back, and when I first had the idea a couple of months ago, I really didn't know if anyone was going to be listening to this. I was just putting it out myself because I wanted to listen to a show like this, but I couldn't find one. I had a little blog on the go, which I'd started about my time in the chair, which is actually coming up in less than a week now, when I'm actually going to be installed myself into the chair at Kennet Lodge, which is quite scary. But when I'd started this, it was just an idea. I ended up buying a bit of equipment off of Amazon, putting it all together, hosting it, putting it out there, and without any publication, just literally through the power of social media, me putting it out there, letting people know it exists and people sharing it, is managed to be being found by more and more people, and most lodges haven't even started yet. So please not only go on to masonicpodcast.com/iTunes if you haven't already, hit the download button, hit the subscribe button so future podcasts come directly to you, ready to go into your ears every Thursday when they're released. Also make sure you rate the show, write a review. Bear in mind, I'm doing this completely myself. I'm not experienced. I'm not an experienced broadcaster. I've literally bought the stuff, done a little bit of Googling on the internet to find out how to do these things. And before you know it, I'm actually putting out these shows completely independently. And because it's being independent, that means that although I'm in Berkshire, although I'm in a lodge which is under the United Grand Lodge of England, it means that it's being listened to everyone, and that's exactly why we had Barry on to talk about Scottish Freemasonry. I've since had someone contact me about Irish Freemasonry, because this goes global, and as we know, Freemasonry is spread universally across the globe. And for me, I'm using social media and podcasting to break down some of these boundaries, to get out of the provinces, to get out of these things, and really just let's all us, Freemasons, use this as a platform to unite. So that really is what I'm looking to achieve. And if you agree with that, please share it with other people you know, people within your lodge. Let them know the links. If you run a lodge newsletter or you're a secretary of the lodge, please drop it. Just pop down the link for masonicpodcast.com in an email. Fire it around people. If you're on social media, please do a little tweet about it. It's at Masonic Podcast on Twitter. So, follow, retweet, try to get as many people listening. That really is appreciated. And hopefully we're going to have more guests coming on, not just in the UK, but around the world. And let's really, if we can all drive together, try and grow this thing. I'm literally doing this myself, completely independently, paying for it out my own pocket. So any assistance in getting the word out there would be greatly appreciated. So I'm going to get on. As I mentioned earlier, I do have a blue book that I need to be reading. It is my installation is going to be happening into the chair of Kennet Lodge. That's my mother lodge, and that's going to be happening on Wednesday. Almost got the day wrong there. On Wednesday, the 23rd of September. So that's less than a week away. So if you're hearing this actually when it comes out on the Thursday or the Friday before, and you'd like to pop along and visit, you'd be most welcome. Please get in contact, robert@masonicpodcast.com. I will email you over a summons. We meet in Reading, which is in Berkshire, the county of Berkshire in the UK. After that date, it's going to be a bit tricky due to the seating arrangements for the meal. But if you'd like to pop along to the actual installation ceremony itself, then you'll be more than welcome. Obviously, you need to be a Freemason already to do that. If you're listening to this and kind of going, hang on a minute, all these people joining in, this sounds like fun, and you're not a Mason, also get in contact as well. And I can put you in contact with someone a little bit maybe closer to you about joining Freemasonry yourself. So if that sort of appeals to you, that would be great. I'm going to get on now. So, of course, remember, masonicpodcast.com/5, and that's going to take you to the show notes for this. And many thanks again to Barry for your time and the enthusiasm you've brought to the show. And also, of course, masonicpodcast.com/iTunes. Hit the subscribe, leave a review, rate the show. It is all genuinely appreciated. I will see you again next week, and by that point, I'm actually going to be Worthful Master of Kennet Lodge. Have a great week. I will see you again soon. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to In the Chair. Visit masonicpodcast.com to see the show notes and in-the-chair.co.uk for more resources to help you get the most out of your Masonic journey. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know by rating and reviewing it on iTunes. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss our next podcast. If you're not already, follow us on Twitter at Masonic Podcast.